So imagine you're holding your morning cup of coffee. Let's say it's, a perfectly made latte.
Ah, the best way to start the day.
Right. It really is. So you're sitting at your favorite table, and you can feel the warmth radiating through that heavy ceramic mug.
Yeah, that cozy feeling.
Exactly. And you can smell that rich, dark, roasted aroma mixing with the sweetness of the milk. You take a sip, and it feels completely solid. It's real. It's satisfying.
It's just a thing you're experiencing.
Yeah, it's a definable, bounded thing just resting comfortably in your hands. But, and here's the thought experiment, if you change just one subtle condition, let's say the temperature of the milk drops by, 30 or 40 degrees.
Oh yeah, that ruins it.
Completely changes the entire experience, right? The silky texture falls totally flat, the sweetness vanishes, and it's replaced by this sort of dull, weird sourness.
The comfort is just gone.
It's gone. And yet, if you really think about it, no new physical ingredient was added to that cup, and no physical ingredient was taken away.
Right, the espresso is exactly the same.
The milk molecules are the same.
Yeah.
Everything is physically there. So the question is, where exactly does the latte-ness exist?
That is the million-dollar question.
I mean, is the essence of the latte hiding in the espresso? Is it in the milk, the heat? Or, and this is kind of where we're going today, does this thing we casually call a latte only ever appear when a dozen different conditions converge in a very specific, temporary way?
It's the kind of question that seems almost too simple at first.
Yeah.
Maybe even a little playful, like a riddle. But it points to this massive blind spot in how we process reality. Because we navigate our entire lives treating the objects around us and the situations we find ourselves in as if they possess an independent, built-in essence.
Like a latte is just a latte.
Exactly. A table is a table. A difficult person at work is just fundamentally a difficult person. We treat them as permanent nouns.
Nouns, right.
But when you apply pressure to that assumption, when you actually start looking for the core essence of the thing, the noun just dissolves. It slips right through your fingers.
It becomes a verb. Yes. It becomes a verb. It becomes a process.
And that slipping feeling, that intense inquiry into ordinary everyday experience, that is the absolute core of our mission for this deep dive today.
It really is.
We are opening up a very specific stack of ancient texts. We're looking at the Samyutta Nikāya.
Which translates to the linked discourses of the Buddha.
Right, the linked discourses. And we're specifically using the translation by Bhikkhu Sujato for this. Our goal here is to explore the Buddha's teaching on something called dependent origination.
Which can sound very dense.
It sounds super academic, yeah. But we want to see how this ancient philosophical framework answers this exact question about the coffee cup. Like, can anything be said to exist independently? Or do things only ever appear when several conditions are present together?
The beauty of diving into the Samyutta Nikāya is that these texts are intensely, almost ruthlessly practical.
They really don't mess around. No, they don't. The discourses we're unpacking today, they serve as the architectural blueprint for Buddhist philosophy. And they aren't interested in abstract metaphysics just for the sake of, arguing at a dinner party.
Right. It's not armchair philosophy.
Not at all. They are hyper-focused on the mechanics of human suffering, how dissatisfaction arises, and much more importantly, how the mechanism that creates it can be dismantled.
So I want to set the stakes for you, the listener, right away, because this isn't just a fun academic exercise about a beverage.
No.
By the end of this deep dive, you are going to see how this exact same principle, this dissolving of the latte, applies directly to your own sense of self.
That's where it gets real.
That's where it hits home.
Yeah.
Understanding this framework completely changes how you experience a random moment of daily stress or anxiety or frustration.
Absolutely.
But to figure out if that latte exists on its own, we have to start at the beginning. We have to look at how we assume things come to be in the first place.
The origin story.
Right. Because when most of us think about causality, about how one thing leads to another, we usually default to an image of a line of dominoes.
Linear causation. It is so deeply embedded in the human operating system.
Domino A falls over, it knocks into domino B, which knocks into domino C.
Right.
A forces B to fall, B forces C to fall. It's mechanical, it's forceful, and it is entirely one-directional. There's a clear instigator and there's a clear victim of the action.
Yes.
But looking at the very first discourse of the Book of Causation, this is SN 12.1, the Buddha proposes a model that completely rejects the dominoes.
He does. And to really grasp how disruptive this was to the people listening to him back then, we need to quickly sketch out the the cultural water they were swimming in.
Right, the context.
Yeah, because in ancient India, prior to and during the Buddha's life, the prevailing explanations for how reality worked were deeply rooted in the Vedic traditions. And those traditions relied heavily on creation myths.
Okay.
You had texts describing a supreme cosmic being, or gods like Brahma or Pachapati, taking action to forcefully create the world.
Like molding clay.
Exactly. Sometimes this was described as the cosmos being generated out of darkness by sheer divine will, or reality being formed through this massive primal sacrifice.
So the cultural baseline was very much about a creator and a creation, a subject taking a verb and forcing an object into existence.
The vocabulary of the time heavily implied a creator projecting a separate effect out into the world. It was an active, forceful generation.
Like a game of pool. The cosmic cue ball strikes the 8-ball and sends it into the pocket.
That's a perfect way to put it. That was the assumed nature of how things come to be. But then the Buddha begins teaching, and he deliberately avoids all of those forceful terms.
Such a specific linguistic choice.
It is. In SN 12.1, when he introduces the chain of dependent origination, he doesn't use verbs of creation or forceful generation. He uses a Pali word, paccaya, which translates much more accurately to a requirement or a condition.
Okay, so how does that shift the narrative? Like, give me an example from the text.
Well, the classic chain of dependent origination he lays out begins with a concept called ignorance. But the text doesn't say ignorance creates choices.
Right.
It says ignorance is a requirement for choices. Or, in another translation, with ignorance as a condition, choices come to be. And then choices are a requirement for consciousness. And it follows this chain all the way down to the arising of old age, death, sorrow, and distress. It's a subtle linguistic choice, yes, but philosophically, it is an absolute earthquake.
Because it completely removes the billiard ball causation.
Exactly.
Like a game of pool, the cue ball possesses energy, it physically strikes the 8-ball, and it forcefully propels that second completely separate object into the pocket. An independent cause produces an independent effect.
Right.
But if we're talking about requirements and conditions, we're talking about an ecosystem. It's not that A forces B into existence. It's that B literally cannot happen unless A is present holding the space for it.
That's exactly it. If A is absent, B simply cannot be. It's about the presence of supportive conditions converging. The Buddha is describing a web of dependencies, not a linear timeline of forceful impacts.
Let's just pull this back to the morning coffee. The espresso shot doesn't cause the latte by forcefully pushing it into existence like a cue ball striking an 8-ball.
No, it doesn't.
The espresso is a requirement. It's a space, a necessary condition that allows the latte to happen.
Yes.
The hot milk is another requirement. The barista's specific physical intention, that's a requirement. The thermal mass of the ceramic mug is a requirement. The atmospheric pressure in the room is a requirement.
Just a whole matrix of things.
Right. None of them are violently creating the latte on their own. They're just converging to allow the event we casually label a latte to arise.
And this is where we ask you, the listener, to look closely at your own internal life. Just think about how often we feel forced by external causes.
Oh, constant.
We use the language of billiard balls all the time to describe our emotions. We say things like, my boss made me angry today, or that traffic jam ruined my morning.
Yeah, we treat the external world, the boss, the traffic, like the cue ball. And our anger is the 8-ball getting slammed into the corner pocket.
Yeah.
We're just the passive victims of forceful causation.
But through the lens of SN 12.1 and dependent origination, your boss didn't force the anger into existence.
Right.
Your boss's tone of voice was just one condition. It was the espresso.
Right.
But a dozen other conditions had to be present for the anger to actually arise. I mean, maybe you were operating on 4 hours of sleep. Maybe you have a deeply ingrained past experience related to being criticized publicly. Maybe your blood sugar was crashing.
So the lack of sleep is the hot milk. The past experience is the barista's technique.
Exactly. The anger isn't a physical object that was hurled at you by another person. It's a temporary phenomenon that only arose because multiple conditions merely converged to allow it to happen in that specific microsecond. If you removed just one of those conditions, say you had a full 8 hours of sleep, you just got a massive raise, and you felt completely secure in your job, the boss's exact same comment might just bounce right off you.
You might even find it funny.
Right. The condition for the anger wasn't met, so the anger could not arise.
That reframing it's incredibly empowering, but also honestly a little intimidating.
How so?
Well, if I'm just a victim of billiard ball causation, I have zero agency. The world hits me, I get angry, end of story. I am off the hook.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Right. But if my anger requires an entire web of conditions to exist, I have to start looking at those conditions. I can change my sleep. I can investigate my past reactions. I can alter the temperature of the milk. I have a role in the ecosystem.
You are no longer a passive object. You are an active participant in a continuous flowing process.
But this introduces a massive headache for the logical mind.
Oh, definitely.
Because if my anger depends on my sleep and my boss's mood depends on his commute, and his commute depends on the city planners. I mean, if everything is just a web of conditions relying on other conditions, I immediately want to find the starting point.
Of course.
I want to know where the very first condition came from. I want to find the very bottom turtle that is holding everything else up.
The desire for an origin story. We have this profound intolerance for infinite regress. We desperately want to know what started the chain.
It's why we debate the Big Bang or a prime mover. We demand a first cause.
And this is a deeply ingrained habit of the human mind. The texts actually show that the ancient practitioners struggled with it just as much as we do.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Which brings us to one of the most clarifying dialogues in the entire Samyutta Nikāya. It's found in SN 12.67.
Okay.
It's a conversation between two of the Buddha's chief disciples, a monk named Sariputta, who was known for his immense wisdom, and another monk named Mahakuhita.
And Kuhita is basically playing the role of the relentless investigative journalist in this sutta, right?
He really is.
He is trying to hunt down that bottom turtle.
Yeah.
He's asking Sariputta about two specific concepts in the chain of dependent origination. He asks about name and form, which essentially means the physical body and the cognitive faculties and consciousness. And he wants to know the origin story. Where do they come from?
He runs through the standard philosophical options of the time. He asks Sariputta, is consciousness made by oneself? Is it made by someone else, like a god? Is it made by a combination of both? Or does it just arise randomly by sheer chance without any cause at all?
And Sariputta shuts every single one of those doors.
Slams them shut.
He says consciousness doesn't cause itself. It isn't caused by an outside force. It isn't a mix of the two. And it certainly isn't random. Instead, he says consciousness and name and form are requirements for each other.
Yes.
Which, on its face, sounds like a frustrating circular riddle.
And Kuhita is just as confused as we are. He pushes back in the text, essentially saying, hold on, you just said consciousness is a requirement for the body and mind, and then in the same breath you said the body and mind are a requirement for consciousness. How can A depend on B while B depends on A? That doesn't make any logical sense.
Right. It feels like a loop.
And to break through that confusion, Sariputta uses this incredibly precise visual metaphor. He tells Kuhita to imagine two sheaves of reeds, like two bundles of tall river grass or bamboo.
Two bundles of grass standing up, leaning against each other. So they form an inverted V shape.
Exactly. They are standing upright, defying gravity, but neither sheaf of reeds can stand independently. Neither one is the single foundational support for the other. There is no base turtle. They are entirely reliant on mutual support.
And Sariputta makes the physics of this very explicit, he says. If you pull one reed away, the other one instantly falls. If you pull the second one away, the first one falls.
The revolutionary nature of this model cannot be overstated.
Really? Why was it so radical?
Because in the surrounding philosophical systems of the time, particularly in the Upanishadic traditions, there was this relentless search for the ultimate ground of being. Consciousness was often elevated to this eternal, infinite divine status. It was the ultimate reality from which all other things sprang.
It was the prime mover.
Exactly. It was the first cause. But the Buddha's framework, as articulated here by Sariputta, says no. There is no first cause holding up the system. Consciousness requires a physical body and a mind to operate, to have a location, to have something to be conscious of.
Right.
And a body and a mind require consciousness to be animated, to be experienced as a living, sentient being. They are the two sheaves of reeds.
I want to just linger on this image for a second because it is the ultimate antidote to that linear domino effect thinking. Let's bring this back to our morning latte.
Yes, let's do that.
Let's look at the heat of the milk and the velvety texture of the microfoam.
Yeah.
They're leaning against each other just like those reeds. You can't extract the temperature, separate it from the milk, and put it in a little box on the counter.
No, you can't.
And you can't extract the velvety texture and put it in another box.
Yeah.
They only exist in mutual reliance. If you pull the heat away, like if you let that latte sit on your desk for 3 hours until it goes dead cold.
Which is tragic.
Very tragic. But that beautiful, silky texture completely collapses.
The texture depends on the heat, and the expression of that specific heat depends on the physical structure of the foamed milk. One doesn't independently create the other out of a void. They sustain each other in real time.
In real time, yeah.
Just as the texture collapses when the heat is removed, consciousness collapses when the physical and mental structure ceases, and vice versa. There is no independent underlying essence propping the whole operation up from underneath.
And I feel like this raises a huge red flag for me, and I'm sure for you listening right now too. If I am supposed to start looking at my life this way, seeing my stress, my identity, and my reality as just bundles of leaning reeds, am I supposed to just take this on faith? Like, is this just a uniquely Buddhist religious belief about how the universe operates that I have to adopt to be in the club?
That skepticism is totally valid, and it's exactly what SN 12 addresses. This text focuses on a concept called idappaccayatā.
Which translates to what?
It translates to specific conditionality.
Right. And the phrasing the Buddha uses in this specific text is striking. It's almost scientific. He says, whether realized ones arise or not, this law of nature persists.
He is deliberately framing his teaching not as a divine revelation handed down from the heavens, but as the discovery of a law-like regularity. In other texts, he actually compares his role to a man wandering through a dense jungle who happens to stumble upon an ancient, overgrown path leading to a forgotten city.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right. He didn't build the city, he didn't pave the road, he just cleared away the brush so that other people could see what was already there. Specific conditionality is presented as an observable structural pattern in the fabric of reality.
So it completely divorces existence from the decree of a creator god or from mystical origin stories. It's just a sobering structural truth. When this exists, that comes to be. When this does not exist, that does not come to be.
It is the physics of experience.
It really reminds me of how we view gravity. I mean, Isaac Newton didn't invent gravity.
No.
He didn't sit under an apple tree and mandate, from this day forward, I decree that mass shall attract other mass.
Yeah.
He merely pointed out the law-like regularity of how objects behave in the universe.
Exactly.
And the Buddha's doing the exact same thing, but with the nature of subjective experience and suffering. He is saying, look, I have observed this pattern. Ignorance leans on choices, choices lean on consciousness, consciousness leans on form. This is just how the machinery works.
It is so crucial for the listener to internalize this. You do not need to believe in dependent origination as a dogma. It demands absolutely zero faith in the supernatural. You just have to observe the mechanics of your own life.
Because it's operating whether you notice it or not.
Yeah, exactly. If you are experiencing profound stress, there are specific, identifiable conditions that converge to give rise to that stress. If you can identify and remove or alter those conditions, the stress must cease. It has nothing to stand on. The reed falls.
Okay, I am with you on the mechanics. But if everything is just conditions reeds leaning against reeds, foam texture relying on milk temperature, does the latte actually exist?
The existential crisis begins.
Right. Or is it an illusion? Because my brain is starting to cramp up a bit here. My mind desperately wants to categorize the coffee cup as either real or fake. It's either a solid object or it's a matrix hologram.
That cognitive dissonance, that intense desire to force reality into one of two neat little boxes, is exactly what the Buddha diagnoses in SN 12.15.
Right.
This is his advice to a monk named Kaccānagotta. And honestly, in terms of philosophical history, this is arguably one of the most consequential texts ever recorded.
Why? Why is this specific conversation with Kaccānagotta so massive?
Because the Buddha perfectly identifies the two default extremes the human mind inevitably retreats to when trying to make sense of a complex reality. He tells Kaccānagotta that the world generally relies on a strict duality. It exists, and it does not exist.
The binaries. Absolutism on one side, nihilism on the other.
Yes. It exists is the belief in eternalism. It is the deep-seated assumption that things possess a permanent, independent, inherent essence. That a latte is fundamentally a latte, that you have a permanent soul that is unchanging.
Right.
And it does not exist is annihilationism or nihilism. It is the belief that because things change, nothing matters, everything is a pointless illusion, and upon death, we're completely annihilated into a void of nothingness.
And it makes sense why people cling to both of those extremes for comfort. I mean, eternalism gives us the comfort of permanence. We want our loved ones, our achievements, our identities to last forever.
Right.
But nihilism, strangely, is also a comfort. If nothing truly exists and nothing matters, I don't have to take responsibility for my actions. If it's all an illusion, my suffering doesn't actually matter.
Both extremes offer a false sense of security. So the Buddha tells Kaccānagotta that right view is precisely the refusal to be caught on either horn of this dilemma.
But how do you refuse both?
Yeah.
Logically, I mean, how can something neither exist nor not exist?
The Buddha explains it not through abstract logic, but through direct observation of the process we've been unpacking this whole time. He says, when you truly observe the origin of the world, when you watch conditions coming together, the reeds leaning against each other, the heat and the milk mixing to form the latte, you cannot possibly say things don't exist.
Because something is clearly happening.
Exactly. The experience has tangible reality.
I can taste the latte. My heart rate is going up from the caffeine. It is having a physiological effect on my body. So the nihilist view of it doesn't exist at all is demonstrably false.
But, and here's the pivot, he continues, when you observe the cessation of the world, when you watch conditions falling apart, the coffee getting cold, the foam dissipating, the body aging and dying, you cannot possibly say things have absolute existence.
Because they don't last.
Right, because if a thing had absolute, independent, inherent existence, it would be immune to conditions. It could never change, degrade, or end. Therefore, the absolutist view of it permanently exists is equally false.
So we are navigating a reality that is entirely fluid. It's just a continuous stream of convergences and divergences.
Yes. And just to briefly touch on why this text is so historically significant, this specific discourse to Kaccānagotta became the foundational seed for an entire philosophical movement centuries later.
Oh, right, Madhyamaka.
Yes, Madhyamaka. A philosopher named Nagarjuna developed this middle way philosophy. He took this exact premise and systematically, logically dismantled every rigid concept of existence humans possess. He argued that precisely because things are dependently originated, they are empty of inherent existence. They exist, but only as temporary conditional events.
I want to try an analogy here to see if I'm fully grasping this middle way between existence and non-existence. Think about a whirlpool in a fast-moving river.
Okay, good image.
Does the whirlpool exist?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you take the absolutist view, yes, the whirlpool exists completely and independently as a permanent thing. You immediately run into a physical problem.
You do.
You cannot take a bucket, wade into the river, scoop the whirlpool out, and carry it home to show your friends. If you scoop it up, the conditions change, the flow stops, and you are just holding a bucket of stagnant water.
Exactly. The whirlpool does not have an independent essence you can isolate. It cannot be extracted from its conditions.
But if you take the nihilist view, no, the whirlpool does not exist, it's just an illusion of the water, you also run into a serious real-world problem. Because I can point to it, I can photograph it. More importantly, if I steer my kayak into it, it contains enough force to flip me upside down and drown me.
Right. It has profound, undeniable consequences. So it is definitely not nothing.
It's not a permanent thing,
Yeah.
but it is a very real, very consequential process.
That is the perfect distinction.
It exists dependently.
Yeah.
It is just a temporary pattern of moving water caused by a complex interaction. The shape of the rocks on the riverbed, the volume of rainfall upstream, the speed of the current. Reeds leaning against reeds. The whirlpool, exactly like the latte, is dependently originated.
Yeah.
It threads the needle, avoiding both. It exists absolutely, and it doesn't exist at all.
And the practical payoff of what the Buddha is telling Kaccānagotta is this. When you begin to see reality this way, as a constant flow of conditions, like your whirlpool, your relationship to the world radically shifts.
How so?
You stop frantically grasping at things, trying to force them to be permanent because you recognize they can't be. And you stop being so terrified when things inevitably change or dissolve because you understand that is their fundamental nature. You are freed from the tyranny of both extremes.
Okay, this is beautiful and poetic when we were talking about cups of coffee and river currents.
Sure.
It is relatively easy for the ego to accept that a latte or a whirlpool is just a temporary convergence of conditions. But here is where the rubber really meets the road for you listening right now. What happens when we take this lens of dependent origination and we turn it 180 degrees inward?
Things get a lot more uncomfortable.
Yeah. What happens when we point it at the person drinking the latte? When we point it at me? Because I don't feel like a collection of temporary parts. I feel like one solid, continuous, very real me. How did the Buddha actually break a human being down?
Now we are entering the territory of the Khandasa Sutta, specifically examining texts like SN 22.81. This is where the Buddha applies the universal law of specific conditionality directly to the human sense of self.
Okay.
He deconstructs the human being into what he calls the five aggregates.
The 5 streams of conditions.
Exactly. He identifies form, feeling, perception, choices, which is often translated as volition or intention and consciousness. And the critical thing to understand here is that these are not physical organs. You can't point to them on an anatomy chart.
They aren't nouns.
Right, they aren't nouns. They are 5 categories of continuous processes. They are 5 streams of conditions that converge rapidly and repeatedly to create the convincing illusion of a solid you, just as the heat, milk, and espresso converge to create the illusion of a solid latte.
To really ground this, we need to take it out of the abstract. Let's walk through an ordinary, everyday scenario and watch these aggregates operate in real time.
Let's do it.
Imagine you're sitting at your desk. You have your perfectly made latte. You're feeling pretty good about your morning. You click open your inbox, and there's an email from your boss.
Oh.
Yeah. It is highly stressful. It is deeply critical of a project you poured your heart into. And worst of all, it is CC to the entire team.
The worst case scenario.
The absolute worst. Within a fraction of a second, your heart rate spikes, your face flushes hot, and you are consumed by a burning, furious need to defend yourself. Let's put that awful, universally relatable moment under the microscope and slow it way, way down using the 5 aggregates.
Okay, so the moment you open the email, the first aggregate is operating. This is form, or rupa in Pali. Form encompasses the physical, material world and your physical body.
Okay.
In this microsecond, form is the actual photons of light emitting from your computer monitor and striking your retinas. It is the physical shape of the letters on the screen. It is also the immediate biological reaction in your body. The tightening of the muscles in your chest, the sudden dilation of your pupils, the flush of cortisol entering your bloodstream.
It's all the raw material hardware functioning.
Yes. Instantly triggered by that hardware is the second aggregate, feeling, or vedana. Now, this is a tricky word in English, so we need to be careful. In this framework, feeling does not mean complex emotional states like jealousy, pride, or regret.
Oh, it doesn't?
No, it refers strictly to the raw, immediate, hedonic tone of an experience. The nervous system instantly categorizes every single contact as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral.
So in the case of reading the first line of that critical email, before you even have a complete thought about it, the feeling aggregate is that sudden, sharp, deeply unpleasant sensation in the pit of your stomach.
Yes.
It is pure, pre-verbal yuck. I do not like this.
Precisely. It is the raw sting of aversion. And that sting immediately triggers the third aggregate, perception or sanya. This is the cognitive sorting machine of the mind. It is the faculty that recognizes labels and interprets the raw data based on past memory.
So perception is the part of the mind that rapidly scrambles its database. It recognizes the shape of the letters, strings them into words, recognizes the boss's email address, notes the CC list, and just slaps a massive red label on the whole event that says, threat. My career is in danger. My social standing in the tribe is under attack.
Exactly. Perception tells a story about the raw data. And once the label of threat is applied, it sparks the fourth aggregate, choices or volition, which is salkara. This is the active, intentional behavioral response.
The fight-or-flight mechanism firing.
Right. In this scenario, volition is the sudden, overpowering urge to strike back. It is the impulse to hit reply all, type out a furious, defensive, highly sarcastic rebuttal, and hit send.
I've been there.
We all have. It is the tightening of the jaw, the mental rehearsing of the argument. It is the movement of the will in response to the perceived threat. And finally, suffusing all of this, we have the fifth aggregate, consciousness or viññāya.
And consciousness is the awareness of this entire chaotic sequence.
It is the bare knowing. It is the subjective illumination of the sight of the screen, the knowing of the unpleasant feeling in the gut, the knowing of the perception of threat, and the knowing of the angry urge to reply.
Okay, walking through that slowly, I can clearly see how the first 4 aggregates are conditional. My body form reacts to the screen. That gut punch feeling is a temporary reaction. My interpretation of the email perception is based on my past insecurities. My urge to yell choices is a reaction to the threat.
Right, they arise and pass.
They are all just passing conditions. They are like the heat in the milk, rising and falling. But this brings me to a massive, glaring question about that fifth aggregate. Consciousness.
Here we go.
The awareness of the event itself. I mean, I can let go of the body and I can observe the angry thoughts passing by like clouds. But who is the watcher? What is the silent, unconditioned awareness that is standing back and observing this swirling river of aggregates?
Oh, this is the trap.
Because it feels like something constant is standing behind my eyes, untouched by the email, just watching it all happen.
This is where we hit the most subtle and pervasive trap in spiritual inquiry. And it is where the Buddha's teaching sharply diverges from almost every other tradition out there. Asking, who is the watcher? Or trying to locate a silent, unconditioned awareness standing safely apart from the flow of experience reintroduces the exact eternalist error the Buddha rejected in his conversation with Kaccānagotta.
Wait, really? The idea of a pure observing witness, which, I mean, that's the goal of so much modern mindfulness, is eternalism.
It is. It is the exact same mistake as believing the latte has a permanent, independent essence. You have just cleverly relocated that permanent essence.
Wow.
You took it out of the physical body and the thinking mind, and you hid it in consciousness. You essentially said, okay, my body and my thoughts are a temporary whirlpool, they are conditions, but my awareness of the whirlpool is a solid, permanent bucket that I can carry around forever.
Mind blown. So I am just playing a psychological shell game with my own desperate desire for a prominent self.
Yeah.
I surrender my body to conditionality. I surrender my thoughts, but I stubbornly cling to the watcher as the ultimate untouchable me. I am still trying to find the bottom turtle.
Exactly. You are trying to find an escape hatch from dependent origination. But the Buddha is painstakingly explicit about this in the texts. Consciousness is not an exception to the rule.
It's not the bottom turtle.
No. Look back at the discourses we started with. In SN 12.1, he states, choices are a requirement for consciousness. In SN 12.67, Sariputta states, name and form are requirements for consciousness. The Buddha is insisting that the subjective awareness you have of reading that email only exists because the physical eyes, the brain, and the mental objects are present.
So to answer my question of who is the watcher, we have to return to Sariputta's image of the reeds.
We must. The noticing itself, the awareness of the email, the awareness of the stress, even the calm, meditative awareness of your own breath is just a condition arising. It is entirely dependent on contact and attention.
There is no third reed.
There is no third reed. There is no third reed standing apart from the other two, magically holding them up from a distance while remaining untouched. The awareness leans on the object being aware of, and the object leans on the awareness.
So what happens when the conditions stop?
When the conditions for noticing cease, like in the deep, dreamless sleep, or under anesthesia, that specific instance of noticing ceases, the system is closed. Dependent origination goes all the way down. There is no hidden observer standing outside the ecosystem.
That completely dismantles the idea of a fixed vantage point. It is profound and honestly a little dizzying. But I can see how, rather than being terrifying, this is the very insight that actually liberates.
Absolutely.
Because if even the watcher is dependently originated, then there is truly nothing left to defend. Which brings us back to you, the listener, right now, wherever you are.
Yeah.
If even your awareness of this deep dive in this exact moment is just a temporary reed leaning against the sound of our voices, then who you are isn't a noun, you are a verb.
Beautifully said.
You aren't a fixed, solid entity suffering through life. You are a continuous, endlessly unfolding pattern of conditions. And if there is no rigid, permanent you to be damaged by the world, no permanent essence that could be stained by a critical email, a bad day, or an insult, what does that mean for your capacity to simply let the next stressful moment arise, do its dance, and pass right through you, just like heat dissipating from a cup of coffee?